Good morning. Good morning. Well, if you're wondering why I'm here or who I am, I'm not Pastor Tom. Hope you would get that much. But I know what you might be thinking. What's going on here? I lost an hour of sleep last night and now I won't even hear a sermon from Pastor Tom? Don't worry though. You'll return to your regular sermon and sleep schedule in no time at all. Unless, of course, this message keeps you up late tonight pondering some big questions. That wouldn't be too bad either. But, to be honest, as I got to writing this, I had a fear that I wasn't qualified. I couldn't offer anything of importance or didn't know enough to be standing here. And I started thinking more and more about what it means to be qualified to lead and qualified to speak. It kind of seems that we're in a society of qualifications. We have to portray the right image, or we won't go anywhere. We won't get noticed. When I was in college, I applied for many internships and opportunities, and of course it's common to not even hear back. But, much to my shock, last August, this is 2019, I got an email from a certain institution thanking me for applying, but saying they were going to move forward with other candidates for a summer 2017 internship. Gee, thanks. A few years too late, but I sure got the message. I thought about responding and saying, thank you for reaching out to me. I'd be happy to hear about more opportunities for 2018. I know you all know how this feels. Maybe not in the exact same way. You're applying for a job, you better have the right experience. Buying a home, I hope you've got the required credit score. And as a student, your test scores are what determine if you're passing or failing and how you're doing relative to those in your peer group. There's a certain standard we're all trying to live by, that we might appear to be qualified or appear to know what we're doing. And it exists all around us, especially online. Have you ever found yourself making that post on Facebook that you know will impress people, that you know will get a lot of compliments? It's very crazy though when we take these beliefs, what we see in our culture, and compare them to what we see in the Bible. You know, it gives us sort of a different view on what it means to be qualified. All throughout Scripture, we see Jesus calling out the hypocrisy of the religious elite, the people who, or so it appeared from the outside, to know it all. In Luke 6:7, the Pharisees watch Jesus to see if he will heal on the Sabbath, so they can accuse him. In fact, there are 14 different times all throughout the Gospels when healing on the Sabbath is referenced. They're not recognizing this man as the Son of God, but rather they're focusing on if he's breaking any of the rules. They fall back on their training and their study, even in the face of the greatest miracle in the history of the world. They would rather maintain a certain image than be able to recognize what's right there in front of them. And Jesus comes along and calls them out for it. In Matthew 6, Jesus warns of the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, standing on street corners and praying so that they'd be seen by others. They wanted others to know just how faithful, just how good they were. They were the most qualified religious scholars in the time, but with everything they'd read, all the prophecies they had studied and they had memorized, they missed what was right there in front of them. And God not only shows us that the most competent people can still be mistaken in their ways, he shows us just how willing he is to call those who appear to not be good enough. In the Old Testament, as we saw in Exodus chapter 4, after God reveals himself to Moses and calls him to deliver his people from the Egyptians, Moses still feels like he can't do it. He pleads with God, saying, "Oh, my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." He's afraid. He feels unqualified, even when being called directly by God. But God knows what he's doing and still shows his wonder through people like Moses. As we know, he went on to become a prophet of the Lord. It's not our right to determine someone's worth in God's eyes, and not even our own worth. He doesn't take into account our religious qualifications when he wants to use us. And there's a lot of comfort in knowing that the things that have held people back since the Old Testament might be the same things that hinder us today. We also see how God uses the young as examples for the faith. In Matthew 18, Jesus says, "Whoever humbles himself like a child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." It's not whoever has the most Bible verses memorized, or whoever recites the most prayers, or even who attends the most church services, but the ones who humble themselves like children. And furthermore, in 1 Timothy 4:12, Paul writes to Timothy, "Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity." It doesn't matter how young Timothy is, Paul shows that this does not take away from his ability. In the Bible, there's no age limit or required work experience or credit score needed to be an example of God's love. Whether you're young, old, or somewhere in between, he can and will use you. We're all prone to think we need to give the right image to be good enough. You know, I was at a networking event recently, and I met these two young men. So naturally, at these type of events, one of the first things you ask is, "Where did you guys go to school?" Some. The first one said, "Oh, George Washington University for undergraduate, and then Harvard Law School." Okay, pretty good. And then the other said, "I went to Brown University." So I tensed up a little. Here I am in front of two Ivy Leaguers. My mind started racing, thinking, these guys are clearly smarter than me. Do I even belong in this conversation? Should I bring up football? I think we'd have him there. But candidly, I was a little intimidated. But why? Why should I feel they're better simply from where they received their degrees? Truth is, I knew almost nothing about them, except this one small piece of information. I knew nothing about their character, nothing about their beliefs, nothing about who they were. What good comes from this way of thinking? Does God really care about where we went to school? Or are we the ones that have established this need to always compare and rank? You know, Instagram, the popular social media platform that is used by young people, is considering removing likes from its platform. This means that its users won't see how many people have liked their friends' posts. They want users to be insulated from how well others are being received by their friends. And this is an app that 1 billion people worldwide and 72% of American teens use. So why would they do this? Well, Instagram's CEO said it like this: "We want people to worry less about how many likes they're getting on Instagram and spend more time connecting with the people they care about." They're saying, you might have the best filter, the best outfit, the best background and lighting, and you're having a great hair day, but you're kind of missing the point. You're missing the real, authentic connection. You're too tied up in wanting the approval and affirmation of others. And as Christians, I wonder if sometimes we can be this same way. If we're too tied up in our appearances and our qualifications as Christians, we can miss the point. God sees beauty in our surrender and in our humility. In Luke 18, as we mentioned, Jesus brings up the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. Two men went into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus: God, I want to thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful on me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the ones who humble themselves will be exalted. We are so tempted to want to be the best, to want to feel superior. We want to outshine others with our jobs, our spouse, and families, thinking, I must be doing all right, because at least I'm not that guy. But the truth is, you can't always know someone's heart. What we see in someone is not what God sees in that very same person. And what the world sees in you is not what God sees in you. You might feel like you don't know enough or aren't talented enough to share the gospel or serve God in a new way. But if God can use Moses, Timothy, the tax collector, then he can certainly use you and I. It's my hope and prayer that we can step out in faith and feel emboldened, knowing that our God is not a God of limitations, but rather a God of love. And when he calls us, and we're tempted to think, me? Really? I can't do that. I don't have the talent, the time, the money, the resources, the help. I hope we realize that none of that is a problem for God. And maybe those me, really moments are the most powerful way that God shows us what he can do through us. Maybe those moments are a time to jump to action, a time to believe rather than doubt and question, a time to be bold and to be unafraid. And if along the way you feel unqualified, you'll be in good company.